Hi, welcome to Read It Bomb. Read It, the Book of Mormon. Thank you so much for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. That really helps the channel out. We have officially passed 300 subscribers, so that's awesome. So yeah, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So here on Read It Bomb, we talk about everything Book of Mormon related and everything related to the restored gospel and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I usually do some reaction videos to I guess other content creators who come out with some interesting videos about the restored gospel or about the Book of Mormon or anything along those lines. And we're doing another Capturing Christianity reaction today. So I guess if you are in the Latter-day Saint, Book of Mormon, Mormonism, I guess know in the YouTube algorithm, it throws up anytime there's, I guess, a new anti video or a new faithful video, whatever it is. And so Capturing Christianity has released yet another video on Mormonism. And the title keeps changing a couple times. Right now, it is Mormonism's greatest fraud exposed. And we're talking about the Book of Mormon, apparently. Sorry, the Book of Abraham, apparently. So we're going to look into this. We're going to see his claims. And yeah, I'm going to show how apparently he does not actually end up using the best argument against the Book of Abraham. Instead, he is just making some claims and he's trying to make that turn into a solid argument without actually using the best argument, I would say, against the Book of Abraham. And then I'm going to turn all that on its head and kind of show you by quoting some other people, some other scholars who have done some research into the Kirtland Egyptian papers and all that, on how his arguments plus even what I could consider maybe the best argument against the Book of Abraham just fall flat, and it kind of takes the wind out of its sails. So there's a lot of people out there who say, look, as he is, right? He's saying this is Mormonism's greatest fail or greatest fraud, right? The Book of Abraham. The thing is, it's been the same constant argument against the Book of Abraham since like 1960 something, right? So whenever I guess Gerald Tanner and whoever his colleague was took the newly found papyri and got them translated, and they made this claim that this has to be where it came from, and they used their arguments. We'll get into that in a second. It's just been the same argumentation repeated time and time again since then. So we've had about 60 years of the same argumentation against the Book of Abraham. And I'm just going to show how some recent scholarship has really taken the wind out of the sails of this argument against the Book of Abraham. And also I'm going to show something that's kind of new scholarship, where Joseph Smith himself claims he doesn't know what the characters that apparently everyone says he gets the Book of Abraham from actually mean. He's going to say, the God has not revealed the meaning of these characters yet. And so if he's saying God has not revealed the characters yet, how is he saying from these same characters I'm getting the Book of Abraham? So again, I'm just showing that there's doubt to all this quote unquote solid evidence against Mormonism in the Book of Abraham. There's a lot of things that aren't actually coming to fruition when you look into it, and the critics say, well, look, this is 100% proof. There's no reason to doubt. You can know that it's all wrong, that he's not a prophet. But yet when you look into it, it's not coming to such conclusive proof that they would like. So let's just jump into it. Let me go ahead and share the screen here, pull up his video, hear some of his claims, and then I'll pull up some faithful apologetic videos and let them argue against what he's saying, and we'll see which one kind of has more sway, which one's using evidence and not just making claims. So yeah, let me share the screen, and here it is. So share. Okay, let's hear what he's got to say.
What if a major religion's sacred scripture was actually proven to be a forgery? And then what if that same church tried to hide it, but then later admitted that the critics were right? I'm Cameron Bertuzzi with Capturing Christianity, and right now we're about to uncover Mormonism's darkest secret, a text called the Book of Abraham. In just the next few minutes, you'll see evidence so damning it forced Mormon leaders to completely change their story. And by the end of this video, you'll know why every reputable scholar calls it a fraud and how the church reacted when the truth got out. Our story begins in 1835 in the bustling town of Kirtland, Ohio, headquarters of the fledgling Mormon church. A traveling showman named Michael Chandler arrived.
Okay, so he's already setting this up, right? He's like, look, they're hiding this or trying to hide this, and so this guy is a professing believing Catholic. I think trying to say your church is hiding something, especially when you're coming from that faith, is kind of like, hey man, let's look in the mirror, right? Let's not try to claim other people are hiding things. Again, did the church try to hide that? I don't know. I don't think they tried to hide it as he's trying to say, but we'll get into what actually are the arguments, what actually has weight, and his argumentation against, I would say, some of the newest scholarship, faithful scholarship, does not hold up. So let's get
arrived with a fascinating exhibit, 4 Egyptian mummies and a collection of papyrus scrolls. Rumor had it that these were genuine artifacts from ancient Egypt, and they stirred curiosity everywhere that they went. Joseph Smith, the founding prophet of Mormonism, was intrigued. Chandler sold him several papyrus fragments along with mummies for a hefty sum, about $2,400 in 19th century money, which was a small fortune at the time. Almost immediately, Smith announced that one of these scrolls contained the lost writings of the biblical Abraham. A blockbuster claim, given that Abraham is revered by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. The only problem? They needed to be translated. Fortunately, we're dealing with the master of translating ancient documents. So then how did Joseph Smith suppose...
Okay, so he kind of just throws out there, fortunately, we're dealing with the master of translating ancient documents. Well, the thing is, the Book of Mormon was translated by the gift and power of God, right? Joseph Smith never claimed to have the ability to read Reformed Egyptian or read the plates from what he was translating himself. He didn't actually know this ancient language. Instead, it was all done by the gift and power of God. And so, is that how he translated the Book of Abraham? I mean, through the gift and power of God, obviously, right? He didn't know any of these ancient languages, right? So no matter what he did, the translation of the Book of Abraham would have been through this gift and power of God. But let's still see what he's getting. He's going to get into the arguments right here, and we're going to start chipping away at what he's saying here.
Supposedly translate these papyrus fragments that contained Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were still a mystery in America. The answer lies in the notebooks he kept, the so-called Egyptian alphabet and grammar documents.
The Egyptian alphabet and grammar documents. Okay, and so this is the common thing, right? So the common argument is, look, these Egyptian alphabet and grammar documents, Joseph Smith used these, and he used these to basically understand in his mind, or claim to understand in his mind what each symbol or each letter meant in Egyptian, and then he's using that to translate paragraphs of stuff, and therefore we know that he's completely wrong because none of this actually comes back to Egyptian. So let's just hear out his argumentation, and then I'm going to, we're going to jump over to a apologist who has done research on the Egyptian papers and actually claims that the Egyptian papers were actually written with a pre-existing Book of Abraham translation. So therefore, this claim that he's making that he used these documents to understand Egyptian in order to translate the Book of Abraham falls flat, because recent scholarship shows that these Kirtland Egyptian papers were made with a pre-existing Book of Abraham script. So if these documents require there being a pre-existing translation of the Book of Abraham, how can the critics go back and say, but he used these documents to therefore translate the Book of Abraham? So we're going to hear his argumentation real quick, and then we're going to go hear the argumentation for the other side of this.
In these pages, Smith and his scribes lined up Egyptian symbols from the scrolls, then wrote out entire English paragraphs alongside them. He insisted this was a divinely guided translation, the same method he'd used to produce the Book of Mormon just a few years earlier. And what's in the finished product?
And then again, he's shooting himself in the foot here, because there's a lot better argument against the Book of Abraham, which is not only talking about the Egyptian, the Kirtland Egyptian alphabet and grammar, right? I don't think throughout this whole video he actually talks about the Abraham manuscripts. So in this greater understanding of the Kirtland Egyptian papers, there are the Book of Abraham manuscripts, and it actually has characters which do appear on one of the papyri next to paragraphs from the Book of Abraham. Right now, we will get into that, and I will show you how it's dubious to claim that this is Joseph Smith's attempt in actually translating. And we'll get into that and see the argumentation from these faithful, apologists who break that down. But I don't think throughout this whole video he actually mentions the Book of Abraham manuscripts. Instead, he keeps going back to the Egyptian alphabet and grammar, which, as also we'll point out, is going to fall flat. So I don't even know why he's not bringing up, I would say, kind of the best argumentation, which is what causes a lot of people to have doubt. He's just talking in broad stroke about the alphabet and grammar documents instead of the specific Book of Abraham manuscripts that make it appear to be this symbol means this paragraph, and that's how we get the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham. So I think that's kind of like a fail on his part for not even somewhat presenting what I would say is the best argument against it. Again, we're going to talk about how that argument does fall flat on a number of different fronts, but that's what I say the critics have the best argument against the Book of Abraham. He doesn't necessarily even bring that one up, and I'll point this out later on.
Joseph Smith's translation became known as the Book of Abraham. It opens with Abraham nearly being sacrificed by a pagan priest, and then narrates his travels to Egypt and revelations about the cosmos, claiming to reveal deep truths about the creation of the world. Smith declared Abraham nearly being sacrificed by a pagan priest, and then narrates his travels to Egypt and revelations about the cosmos, claiming to reveal deep truths about the creation of the world. Smith declared it scripture, teaching it to his followers as a genuine record of Abraham himself. But if Joseph Smith believed this was truly an authentic ancient document, you'd expect the original papyri to be preserved at all costs, right? That's what makes the next part.
Oh, okay. So I think this claim right here that he's about to make is just him not understanding Latter-day Saint history. So he's saying, well, if these are actually ancient documents from Abraham and they actually have the Book of Abraham on them, why does M. Smith later on sell the documents, right? Why does he sit over there or why does the church allow her to sell these? Right? Let's hear him say that.
Part of the story so puzzling. Sometime after Smith's death in 1844, his widow, Emma Smith, and other relatives ended up selling the mummies and the papyri to different collectors. Portions of the scrolls were moved around over the years, even lost or destroyed, until fragments resurfaced in the 20th century. If this really was the lost Book of Abraham, the very words of a biblical patriarch, why would it be so casually sold off like a mere curiosity? But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Okay. The answer to that is, I'm pretty sure it's Emma Smith's next husband, who was like a drunk and actually kind of like a terrible person. I literally think there's a story of, I think he ends up getting, forgive me if I'm wrong, but I remember reading this and actually kind of showed the character of Emma Smith and who she was. Her next husband actually ended up getting another woman pregnant, and then that woman couldn't actually put the baby up, like couldn't actually afford to keep the child, and so Emma Smith allowed that child to be. She actually raised the child as her own, and then hired the mother to, work as like kind of like a wet nurse or a nurse in the home with the child, so that mother would actually get to be with her child. So I'm pretty sure I've heard that that's a story about Emma Smith and about her husband doing that to her afterwards. But he was like, I think I heard that he might have been a drunk sort of a thing, but he and her, I guess, made the decision to sell off these documents. Brigham Young didn't have these documents, right? They were owned by the Smith family, so them or him, the other husband, deciding to, sell off these documents to get extra money, that has nothing to do with, to go against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's their decision. They owned it at the time. I think it's sad. I don't think it was the best opportunity for them to do that with those documents, but that's what happened. I think it's kind of just part of the ignorance of the history of the Latter-day Saint movement, and understanding the schism and how Emma Smith stayed behind. And the vast majority of the church went, to Utah or out west under the tutelage or under the auspices of the 12 apostles. So just not knowing that I guess claim or that snarky remark doesn't really have too much weight. Okay, but let's continue.
Ourselves. All right. At first, 19th century Mormons actually believed him. After all, not many people could translate Egyptian in America back then. But as scholars in Europe unlocked the secrets of hieroglyphs using the Rosetta Stone, they began comparing Joseph Smith's Book of Abraham to actual Egyptian. What they found would haunt the Mormon Church.
Okay. So he's brought up already the argumentation against the Book of Abraham using these Egyptian alphabet and grammar documents. He's going to bring that up later on. Here, he's going to talk about how early in the 1900s, they sent off the kind of like the facsimiles and also the interpretations of them, and how other Egyptologists were at that time were like, no, this isn't right. And he's going to say basically, well, the leaders of the church just said they're biased and they don't actually understand what's going on. And so therefore, he's going to say, well, they just shrugged it off. Right. Sure. I guess I don't really have much to say about that. His main claim, though, is about the Egyptian papers, and I do not want to have to watch this whole video. So needless to say, I'm just basically going to say the whole thing about the facsimiles. I think, as we'll see with this argumentation I'm going to show, the Kirtland Egyptian papers themselves required a pre-existing translation of the Book of Abraham to be created. So therefore, they couldn't actually have been used to translate the Book of Abraham. And then these same Kirtland Egyptian papers, the alphabet and grammar, actually didn't all appear from the papyri. There's things in them that appear from other revelations in the Doctrine and Covenants. So therefore, that questions, well, if this is somehow only a translation of the Book of Abraham, why are other of Joseph Smith's revelations appearing in the Kirtland Egyptian papers? We'll get into that and some other things. But all this about the facsimiles, I think there is an apologetic answer to if there actually is, a translation of the Book of Abraham on these scrolls, then therefore it would just be they're using this image to kind of represent what they're talking about in the translation. That's kind of like the apologetic answer. It would be this image is kind of taken to represent what they're talking about, even though if the original intent of that image was kind of something else. Accept that or not, that's fine. But I have no problem with that because we're going to get into the main argumentation against the Book of Mormon and how it falls flat. So let's jump over here. Share this tab instead. This is about the Kirtland Egyptian papers. So I actually have not yet put the links to this in the description. I'll probably do that later. But if you want to see the 3 videos I'm going to share, go to Read It Bomb channel, go to playlist, and then go down to Book of Abraham. And these 3 videos are in that playlist. I think there's only like 5 videos, and these 3 videos I'm going to share are all in there. So this is a presentation that was put up on Fair Mormon or Fair Latter-day Saints in 2020. And it's by William Schryver, or Schryver, I'd say. And so he's talking about what the Kirtland Egyptian papers are all about, what they're actually about, what's in them, how they were created, all that sort of stuff, why they were created. It's pretty fascinating. And once I saw this, any doubts or anything that the critics said kind of just started falling flat, right? Because this seemed pretty conclusive stuff right here. So we're gonna watch a couple of clips from this video. I'm just gonna try to pull it up real quick. Give me a second. So here we're gonna see what the Kirtland Egyptian papers are.
And have some association with the Book of Abraham. There are 4 alphabet documents, 1 counting document, 2 small notebooks, 7 Abraham manuscripts, and 2 documents containing copies of characters from the Joseph Smith papyri. The Egyptian alphabet consists of 3 nearly identical documents in the handwriting of, respectively, William Phelps, Joseph Smith, and Oliver Cowdery. For convenience today, I will refer to these documents as the alphabet. It is almost certainly these documents to which the following entry in the history of the church refers. The remainder of the month, I was continually engaged in translating an alphabet to the Book of Abraham and arranging a grammar of the Egyptian language as practiced by the ancients. This is, I believe, a very deliberately worded statement that contains more import than is readily apparent. I shall yet return to it near the end of my remarks today. Here we see all 4 pages of William Phelps's alphabet document side by side. 136 characters were selected for treatment in the alphabet. They are listed in the leftmost column of 4 sheets of paper. This list of characters is divided into 5 unequal parts. The first part contains 23 characters, the second part 59 characters, the third part 17 characters, the fourth part 14 characters, and the fifth part 24 characters. Of the 136 total characters selected for the alphabet, 69 were assigned sounds. Of the 69 characters to which...
Okay, so this is just giving a brief description of what the Egyptian papers are. So I want to fast forward to the argumentation we have here. So his argumentation is later on that basically both the alphabet and the grammar documents require a pre-existing Book of Abraham script. So therefore they could not have been used to translate the document because they themselves required there already being in place a document or a translation of this of the document to be created in the first place. And so that's what this first part is. His first part here is showing off basically, let's see here. Okay, let's watch this part right here.
Explanation having been proposed for it. It is similar in format to the others with some variations. In it, a character is assigned to the English text of the numbers from 1 to 79. There are 3 columns headed characters, names, and English explanation. The Kirtland Egyptian papers also contain 2 small notebooks and 2 sheets of characters from papyri. We will not discuss.
Okay, he is still going through all of what the Egyptian papers are. Okay, right here. Okay, the key to understanding the meaning and purpose of the Kirtland Egyptian papers is found within the documents entitled Egyptian alphabet grammar and the alphabet of the Egyptian language and Egyptian counting. So he's saying that these 4 different documents themselves contain the key of what is going on with the Kirtland Egyptian papers, right?
Documents known collectively as the Kirtland Egyptian papers is to be found within the manuscripts entitled Egyptian Alphabet, Grammar and Alphabet of the Egyptian Language, and Egyptian Counting. I shall attempt today to establish the following thesis expressed in 2 parts. The explanations contained in the alphabet documents are dependent on a pre-existing text of the first 3 chapters of the Book of Abraham. This dates the reception of the translation of these chapters to the period between July 4th and July 17th, 1835, which is when the alphabet project was commenced.
Okay, and so notice he says right here, the Egyptian alphabet documents. Okay, so the alphabet documents are only part of the Egyptian Kirtland papers. Okay, so let's hear what part 2 of his thesis is going to be.
The greatly expanded character explanations contained in the grammar documents are manifestly dependent not only on the first 3 chapters of the Book of Abraham, but also on the remainder of the revealed Book of Abraham, as well as the explanations to facsimile 2. This roughly dates the reception of the translation of these things to a period between late 1835 and early 1836. This thesis expresses what I would like to term the essential elements of understanding in respect to the Kirtland Egyptian papers. So what is the evidence of the dependency of the alphabet and grammar on a pre-existing text of the Book of Abraham?
Okay, so right here, he's going to present the evidence of what he has, I guess, put forth or found out in order to prove that there is an existing translation used to create these documents. Notice Cameron's whole thing. Cameron is the host of Capturing Christianity. His whole argument against the Book of Abraham is, well, look, Joseph Smith used these documents called the Egyptian language and alphabet and grammar, and he used these to understand in order to translate the Book of Abraham. Here, William Schryver, he is doing away with his whole notion because he's saying, no, these documents required a pre-existing translation. And let's see some of the evidence for that.
Being a computer programmer by trade, I approached the problem as would a database analyst. I began by creating a data table with the basic information of the alphabet documents. I assigned a sequential index number to each of the 69 characters to which sounds had been assigned in the order in which they appeared. I then created individual data elements for the document, the sound as transcribed in that document, and the explanation provided for the character. In the process of creating this data table, it occurred to me to analyze the data by breaking it down into even more fundamental components. Therefore, I created a new data table containing every substantial word used in its explanations. Substantial words were defined as those conveying substantial meaning. For example, articles such as the or and conjunctions such as and but were excluded. I further categorized each of the substantial words as either unique or generic. Here are some examples. I then performed a rigorous inventory of every instance of these substantial words as attested in the 5 chapters of the Book of Abraham, as well as Genesis chapters 12 and 15, which chapters contain the biblical text corresponding to the same periods of time in the life of Abraham. The Genesis chapters were designed to serve as control texts for the analysis. I assigned an index number based on the alphabetical order of the substantial words. I then associated with each substantial word the corresponding verses in the comparison texts where the word was judged to be attested, keeping account of the number of times and in which verses each word was attested. Here is the detailed reference from the study.
Okay, so hopefully that made sense. So basically, he's a computer analyst or data analyst, and so he's breaking down each one of the definitions of these words, or in the grammar document, he's breaking down the extended definitions of the different degrees of the words, and he's comparing that to the Book of Abraham itself. And so basically, he's going to do all this, and his hypothesis after, or the proof, or the evidence of what it comes out as, is that the documents require there to be, because of these unique words, a pre-existing translation of the Book of Abraham, because these documents had so much specific nature, these definitions of what was already going to be in the final translation, that it wouldn't have really made sense for them to have used this to translate it, because it was just so specific. And he'll get into further, I guess, evidence of that here soon. So let's just kind of skip around. I don't want to watch the whole video. That's kind of the issue with this. So I'm going to get into where he's more defining this. Okay.
To produce an as yet unknown text. The substantial words are almost all proper nouns that form a lexicon of people, places, and things, almost all of them from the Book of Abraham, and often very uniquely so. If, as Mormon critics have argued for the past 40 years, the alphabet and grammar was produced before the text of the Book of Abraham was received, and was the means by which that text was subsequently translated from the papyri, then how likely is it that the would-be translators would include virtually nothing but unique words and phrases from an as yet unwritten book? You see,
okay, did y'all understand that? So basically his analysis of these documents, right? The Egyptian alphabet, the Egyptian grammar, they use these unique words to quote unquote define these different symbols or these characters or these hieroglyphics, but the unique words they used in defining them were so spot on, right? With I guess what we actually have in the finished translation. In the way they're defining that, it's without a doubt that there had to be a pre-existing script, a pre-existing translation, right? So therefore, these documents weren't used to translate; they were used, or they were created from the translation. Okay, let's go back a little bit.
Translators would include virtually nothing but unique words and phrases from an as yet unwritten book. You see, the thesis of the alphabet and grammar as a papyri deciphering tool presupposes that the authors don't already know the text their tool is being designed to produce. But that is not what we find in the substantial words of the alphabet documents. Quite to the contrary, what we find are references to a story that's already been written. The substantial words contained in the Egyptian alphabet explanations are related to the specific language of a clearly deleted portion of the Book of Abraham, while not attesting a corresponding relationship to the other portions of the Book of Abraham, nor to the chapters from Genesis. As illustrated in the above graph, the substantial words of the alphabet are demonstrably attested in much of chapter 1, some but not all portions of chapter 2, an initially puzzling fact that has a later explanation, and a substantial portion of chapter 3. There is no significant attestation of the substantial words in chapters 4 and 5, nor in the Genesis chapters. My summary findings? Of the substantial words attested in all 3 of the Egyptian alphabet documents, over 90% are correspondingly attested in the first 3 chapters of the Book of Abraham, while being rarely attested, if at all, in Abraham 4 and 5 and Genesis 12 and 15. Summary conclusion? Analysis by substantial words strongly suggests a dependency of the alphabet on a pre-existing text of much of the first 3 chapters of the Book of Abraham. Now, whereas the substantial word analysis was based only on the explanations found in the alphabet documents, for my subsequent analysis.
Okay, and so he goes on to do the same thing with the grammar, or the Egyptian grammar documents. So basically, this analysis that he's done is throwing out this whole hypothesis of, hypothesis that Joseph Smith used or claimed that to use his prophetic ability to understand these different characters. And then he created this page of, well, here's the definitions, and then they went back and used those definitions to create the Book of Abraham. Instead, he's saying that the evidence of the analysis is showing that there had to be a pre-existing translation, because it would be almost impossible to do this, or to have spot-on translations of a document they don't know what it says already. I don't know if I'm making that more confusing, but I'm going to leave the link in the description. It's already in my channel. If you go to playlist Book of Abraham, it's right there. But I find this pretty interesting, pretty conclusive, and he's giving, obviously he's not providing all the data here in this simple, document. I don't know if elsewhere he's providing that, where people can go through and kind of double check him. But basically, what's going on is he seems to be giving more evidence than what the critics are. The critics are just saying, look, this is how we understand this, and we're just saying that Joseph Smith did this way. But he's using data analytics, or he's analyzing the data in such a way as you would in other things to see what's going on. Okay, he does the same thing with the grammar document. So let's kind of skip forward and see what he's doing with grammar. Okay.
Mentioned earlier, portions of chapter 2 not attested in the alphabet can then be found in the expanded explanations of the grammar. Indeed, the expanded explanations in the grammar serve to confirm the dependency of the earlier alphabet documents on a pre-existing text of the first 3 chapters of the Book of Abraham. Parts of chapters 1 to 3 that were skipped or only hinted at in the alphabet are very specifically attested in the grammar. In addition, the expansions contained in the grammar attest a dependency on significant portions of both chapters 4 and 5 of the Book of Abraham, as well as the explanations for facsimile 2. Though produced during 2 different periods of time, the alphabet and grammar should be considered a single document created in 2 distinct stages. The first stage contains the basic explanations for the selected characters. The second stage contains expanded explanations for the same characters. What we are going to do now is perform a detailed comparison of extracts from the combined alphabet and grammar with selected passages from the Book of Abraham. By highlighting in succession the words and phrases from the source text upon which the explanations are dependent, it becomes intuitive to discern the dependency of which I have been speaking. The series of slides we will now view contain in the left column characters from the alphabet and grammar, the transliterations given of their sounds, and relevant extracts from the larger body of explanations given for that character. In the right-hand column is a passage from the Book of Abraham with the text grayed out. As correspondences to parts of the passage are attested in the character explanations on the left side, I will bold and display in red text the parts of the passage to which those explanations refer. In the case of this first character juxtaposed with Abraham 1 through 3, you can see that I have bolded the words related to the explanations for character 14, iota. Character 39, Beth Ka, then provides more of the context. You'll note that the text previously attested in character 14 is now displayed in bold black, while the newly attested text is in bold red. In this character are referenced very specific portions of verses 1 and 2, another place of residence and greater happiness and peace and rest. Now with character 66, almost all of the remaining context of this passage is attested. Here we see the right of the priesthood coming down from the beginning, the right of the firstborn, a follower of righteousness, one who possesses great knowledge, a possessor of greater knowledge, a father of many nations, a prince of peace, one who keeps the commandments of God, a patriarch, a rightful heir, a high priest. Here we pull in Adam and the priesthood rights descending from him. And with the final addition of the land of the Chaldeans, this passage is shown to be attested virtually in its entirety. This next passage is one of the most impressive examples of.
Okay, so let's. So basically, what he's doing is he's showing how, based on the alphabet document, based on the grammar document, it's going through and he's showing, look, they had to have had, these translations of what we're seeing in the Book of Abraham because it's spot on. All these things are adding up to exact word for word, basically, definitions of what we see in the Book of Abraham. So we're going to continue on here. Let's skip a little bit. Again, he's showing more right here. He's just showing more evidence of it. And I just want to get to the conclusion because I want to get to his part 2, right? His part 2 is awesome here. Okay.
Eon Kolob is 1,000 years on earth. Time precludes my referencing more examples such as these from the text of the Book of Abraham, but I have created a cross-reference by individual character of every verse in the Book of Abraham that is attested in the alphabet and grammar. All 5 chapters are substantially attested. The alphabet and grammar is dependent on a story that has already been written. We are able to discern within it the complex contextual elements of the Book of Abraham only because we already know the story. And the complex interrelated aspects of the references we find simply could not have been achieved unless the whole story had already been produced. In short, there is too little of the story of the Book of Abraham in the alphabet and grammar for it to have been used to produce the story, yet too much of the story for it not to be dependent on the rest of the story.
Okay. So I really like that. I thought that was interesting. So again, this whole document, and then I've skipped around, so please go back and watch it. I'll put the link in the description later on. But basically what he's doing here is he's getting away, as I said, he's taking the wind out of the sails of this whole criticism. Well, the alphabet and grammar, the Egyptian alphabet and grammar documents are actually used to translate the Book of Mormon. It's how Joseph Smith, through his prophetic, abilities, stated that he could understand Egyptian, and then they decided to, write down the definitions of what he said, and they went back and they used that to translate. Again, his analysis, him breaking this down as a data analyst, destroys that. He's saying no, this is dependent on a pre-existing script. It's the evidence that we have is too conclusive to claim otherwise. Okay, so we're going to go right now to his part 2. Okay, because his part 2 is going to basically give an understanding that's going to, I think, come up again in the Capturing Christianity video. We're going to watch some parts of this and then go back and it's going to give us some good understanding here. So let's start this. Give me a second here.
But if, as has been asserted for the past 40 years, these documents were not prepared as a tool to decipher the papyri, what then was their purpose? I confess that my original thesis was consistent with Professor Hugh Nibley's idea that the alphabet and grammar represent the product of an effort on the part of its authors to reverse engineer the Egyptian scrolls by using the pre-existing English text of the Book of Abraham as a primer. In other words, they had in their hands what they believed was an English translation of at least a portion of the scrolls they had purchased, and therefore they logically concluded that they could replicate Champollion's approach to the Rosetta Stone. You'll recall that Champollion used the Greek text on the Rosetta Stone as a primer to decipher the corresponding hieroglyphic Egyptian text. I surmise that William Phelps, Joseph Smith, and Oliver Cowdery set out to do something similar with the previously received text of the Book of Abraham. However, as my studies of the alphabet and grammar materials progressed, I discovered evidence that effectively disproved such a notion. I discovered
Okay. Well, one second.
That several of the explanations in the alphabet and grammar documents were dependent not on text from the Book of Abraham, but rather on very recognizable passages from others of Joseph Smith's prior revelations, most prominently sections 76 and 88 of the Doctrine and Covenants.
Okay, so that's a teaser for what's going to happen. So basically, he's saying that these documents, which were supposed to be used to specifically translate the Book of Abraham, right? Actually, in them, there are references to other revelations of Joseph Smith that are not in the Book of Abraham. Specifically, as he said, and he'll show us here, section 76 and section 88 in the Doctrine and Covenants. And we'll see that in a second. But basically, there's two frames of thought here, right? So the critics can say, well, look, he used this to translate the Book of Abraham, right? And we're claiming he got that wrong. And again, Cameron in his video didn't actually go against the I would say the best argument against the Book of Abraham, and I'll show you what that is here in a second, and why it falls flat as well. But he just brings up and he's claiming, well, he used these documents, and these documents are wrong, right? But if you were to say, well, okay, well, if let's say Joseph Smith did already translate the Book of Abraham, and he makes and creates these Egyptian alphabet and grammar documents, well, then the critic could turn around and say, well, but then he's still trying to claim he's translating Egyptian, or that he's like backtracking Egyptian, as what William Schryver just said here. He originally and used to think that, right? So the critics could say that too and say, well, he still thought he was, giving us real Egyptian, understanding here, and it's wrong. So therefore he's still a false prophet. That's what they can come back and say. But with this video, the second part to his presentation, William Schryver, what he's going to do is blow that criticism out of the water. right? He's gonna show us with what he's saying that the intent behind these documents has nothing to do with actually showing us Egyptian language. It has nothing to do with translating the Book of Abraham. The hypothesis he gives here is very interesting. So I'm going to let him play a little bit more. I'm going to play a little bit more, and I'm going to let him say it in his own words because he's going to say it best.
We could spend an hour discussing nothing but the dependencies on material not found in the Book of Abraham, but we will focus on just one of the impressive examples.
Again, so he's going to show right here how there is, there's words, there are definitions, there is text that does not appear in the Book of Abraham that appears in supposedly the Egyptian papers that were used to translate. Again, that's what all the critics saying. That's what Cameron's saying. But yet, right here, he's showing that there's a dependency between the Egyptian grammar and the Egyptian alphabet documents and Section 76, which is nowhere in the Book of Abraham. So therefore, he's showing that that conclusion cannot be right. Okay, and then he's going to come up with his own hypothesis, and he's going to give some solid evidence to support what he's trying to claim here. But let's just watch this. This is pretty conclusive here.
Character 46 makes clear reference to the celestial kingdom where God resides. Character 47 merely references another kingdom governed by different laws, and as such constitutes nothing more than a placeholder for what we shall see must be the terrestrial kingdom. Character 48, however, was provided with expansions beyond another kingdom governed by different laws, explanations that clearly indicate its relationship to specific language employed in Section 76 to describe the telestial kingdom. There are three components attested. Subjects of this kingdom suffer the wrath of God until some future period, or in the words of Section 76, until the fullness of times. Next, and this is the most striking of the correspondences, we read that the inhabitants of this kingdom differ one from another in glory, which is precisely what we read in Section 76. As one star differs from another star in glory, even so differs one from another in the telestial world. Finally, we read that in this kingdom, the subjects behold not the face of God, for where God and Christ dwell, they cannot come worlds without end. Next is character 49, which very succinctly references the language from Section 88 that describes a kingdom which is not a kingdom of glory. Thus we see, in the explanations given to four successive characters from the alphabet and grammar, very particular references to specific passages from those two giants of Joseph Smith's previously received revelations, sections 76 and 88. Right in order, this so-called grammar and alphabet of the Egyptian language is making reference to the celestial, terrestrial, and telestial kingdoms, followed immediately by the kingdom which is not a kingdom of glory. I went on to identify several additional references that are clearly dependent on other passages from the Doctrine and Covenants. I confess I was rather befuddled by this finding, and it took me several days of contemplation before I began to appreciate its import and its implications. First of all, I came to see that my initial hypothesis could not possibly be.
Okay, so he's going to explain now, right, that the hypothesis that, he's just using his pre-existing Book of Abraham translation that he got through pure revelation to then go back and try to give us decode or decipher, as he's saying, the Egyptian language. What he's in the show is going to do away with that criticism. Because again, like I said, if we're saying, well, he actually didn't use the alphabet and grammar documents to translate, the critic can come back and say, well, then he's apparently trying to give us real Egyptian and it still fails. He's going to say, well, no, that has nothing to do with it. I don't know if that made sense, but just listen to him.
Be true. To the extent this lexicon was built partially on texts that have no relationship to the Egyptian papyri, texts that were written not in Egyptian at all, but in English, then the alphabet and grammar simply could not have been intended as a tool to decipher the papyri. Indeed, the more I considered the evidence in this new light, the more I came to believe that these men were not focused on translating the Egyptian papyri at all. One of the keys to this conclusion was my discovery that, of the 69 characters to which explanations were assigned, most of them are not even Egyptian and do not appear on the papyri. Let me repeat.
Okay, so Capturing Christianity, Cameron Patuzzi, right? I think that's how you say his last name. But Cameron, the host of Capturing Christianity, his whole claim is that, these documents, the Egyptian grammar, the Egyptian alphabet, Joseph Smith used these to translate the Book of Mormon, right? But as we're just hearing now, the vast majority of the characters on the Egyptian alphabet document are not Egyptian, and they don't come from the Egyptian papyri, right? So what the heck's going on here, right? And again, this is something that he's not telling you. Right. He's just the Cameron guy, the Capturing Christianity guy is just making this claim. Oh, you know what? The Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham, it's the greatest fraud. They're trying to hide it. Look at all this stuff. I'm going to say that it was translated and, it's not right. But yet he's not telling you essential facts that, the vast majority of these characters on these documents don't actually come from the papyri. But I'm going to say that he's using these to translate the papyri in order to give us the Book of Abraham, but yet it doesn't really make sense. And also these documents actually have information that don't come from the Book of Abraham, but actually come from other translations. Like, what's going on? He's not giving you any of this. One, I don't even think he knows, right? Capturing Christianity, he's released videos before about the restored gospel, about Mormonism, about Joseph Smith, and they've been, copy and paste criticisms. He literally goes to Mike Winger, he, Googles, criticisms of the LDS Church, whatever it is, and he copy and pastes them. And I've done reactions to his videos before, and some of them are just really bad. And then some of them are just, well, if you had researched a little bit more, you'd see where we get this or why this is the way it is. So here, this completely destroys this part, plus what we already watched before in part 1, completely destroys this whole notion that the Kirtland Egyptian alphabet and grammar papers were used to give us the book of Abraham. And then here he's going further to say, and Joseph Smith wasn't even actually trying to go back and decipher Egyptian. So let's hear what he has to say.
Most of the characters explained in the Egyptian alphabet documents are not Egyptian and do not appear on the Egyptian papyri in question. A few of the characters are Egyptian and can be found on the papyri, but not in any one place and not in any order and not with any discernible relationships. They appear to have been selected arbitrarily. Of the 69 characters given explanations, some of them are clearly invented. Some are composites. In other words, they are formed by combining 2 or more previously used characters. And, much to my surprise, I discovered that several of the characters can be traced to ciphers used by the Knights Templar and the Freemasons. So let's pause a minute to review the important elements of evidence at this point in the investigation. First of all, we're dealing with a document whose text is dependent on and informed by the Book of Abraham, as well as others of Joseph Smith's previous revelations. It employs a mixture of some Egyptian characters, some apparently invented characters, and other characters selected from centuries-old ciphers. The next clue in our mystery comes in the form of what may well be the most instructive 2 pages of the entire collection of documents known as the Kirtland Egyptian Papers, the Egyptian counting document. Why is this document?
Okay, so he's going to show here in this document how none of these numbers are actually Egyptian, right? And so using this, he's going to use the counting document as a catalyst to therefore explain how, or his hypothesis and his understanding of what the Egyptian Kirtland papers are, right? But in this document, he's going to explain, well, actually, there's not a single character in the counting document that in itself is Egyptian or from the papyri, right? So let's watch this, and he's going to use this to jumpstart or to catalyst into his hypothesis.
So instructive because it, more clearly than all the others, demonstrates the fundamental purpose of the project of which it is an integral part. As I mentioned earlier, the Egyptian counting document lists a series of characters with names and English explanations. What is most interesting, however, is that the characters in the Egyptian counting document are very obviously not Egyptian. They have no relationship whatsoever to the papyri. The character representing 1 appears to be a minor variation of the standard Arabic numeral for 1. 2 is also somewhat similar to the Arabic numeral. 3 is a variation of 2. 4 is Arabic. 5 is Arabic. Here's where it gets really curious. 6 is identical to the Sanskrit character for the number 6. In a table of Knights Templar ciphers I discovered, one of the ciphers was based on Sanskrit characters. 7 is Arabic. 8 is Arabic. 9 is identical to the Sanskrit character for 9. And finally, 10 appears to be a minor variation of the Arabic. As I pondered the ramifications of these facts, the conclusion became obvious to me. What we have here is a tool not intended to decipher Egyptian, but rather one intended to encipher the descriptive English text of the cardinal numbers. It constitutes a specimen of what is known in cryptography as a cipher key. The characters which are not Egyptian and which do not come from the papyri are intended to be a cipher representing the English words in the explanations column. Thus, this character means 6. Similarly, this pair of characters means 10 and 1 are 11. And these 3 characters mean twice 10 and 1 are 21. So why is this document entitled Egyptian Counting? There is absolutely nothing Egyptian about it. Nothing at all.
Okay, so he goes on further to flesh out this hypothesis. Again, we're only 8 minutes in to a 27-minute video here. I don't have time to go through all of it, but I'm going to fast forward, and we're going to see a little bit of the evidence he puts forth to support these claims. A couple more interesting things that are actually going to pop up in the rest of Cameron's video that I'd love to point out. But basically here, his hypothesis, after really understanding this Egyptian paper, the Egyptian counting, and seeing that not a single letter or single number from the Egyptian counting document actually comes from the papyrus. Not a single number actually is a character on the papyrus or has anything to do with Egyptian. Right. And so the hypothesis he comes up with is actually trying to be a cipher. Right. And the interesting thing is he's going to pull up journal entries from W.W. Phelps. Right. I believe that's who it was. But he's going to pull up journal entries from months or weeks before Michael Chandler, I believe his name is, the guy who sold Joseph Smith the papyri, months before he actually came into town. One of the people who were the go-to, I think it's W.W. Phelps, on this whole Kirtland Egyptian papers, actually has a the same layout of these Egyptian papers in his diary, in his journal, and saying, "Oh, look, I'm trying to come up with the pure language." Right. So the pure language is this idea that before the Tower of Babel, there was a pure Adamitic language, and it was perfect. Right. And so this is their understanding of trying to mimic that, trying to make something that they can claim could be kind of like similar to the pure language. And so let's kind of let me skip forward to find that. I always thought that was interesting. So it's not trying to decipher Egyptian. It's trying to cipher these English understandings into these characters. So let's watch this real quick.
Of the Masonic cipher, also called the Rosicrucian cipher. This cipher dates back to the late 17th century and is a simple substitution cipher which exchanges letters for symbols. In cryptography, a substitution cipher is a method of encryption by which units of plain text are replaced with cipher text according to a regular system. The receiver deciphers the text by performing an inverse substitution by aid of a cipher key. The Masonic cipher is based on fragments of 4 separate geometric grids, which form 26 individual spaces in which the letters of the English alphabet are placed. Here I have randomly placed the 20.
Okay, so again, his hypothesis is that these Kirtland Egyptian papers are actually intended to be a cipher. They're not deciphering Egyptian. They're not used to translate the Book of Abraham. Instead, it's a cipher to encrypt something. And he'll get more into that here. He's going to show you
26 letters of the alphabet in the 26 compartments of the grid. Here we see how the individual grid fragments form distinct symbols, juxtaposed with the substitution character from the key. The first grid of the key comprises 9 cipher characters and 9 substitution characters. In our presently defined key, we see the cipher characters and the letter of the alphabet they represent. First, the letter A, the letter C, the letter E, character, substitution character, values.
Sorry, I'm just skipping forward a little bit to save some time here. Let's see here. This is downloaded. I don't know why it's taken.
In addition to encryption, there were other motivations driving this Egyptian alphabet project, specifically an interest that precedes by many years their encounter with Egyptian papyri in July of 1835. This interest was undoubtedly influenced by a larger body of European philosophical thought dating back to at least the 17th century, literature that speculated concerning the nature of the language of the ancients. William Phelps was extremely interested in the notion of something he termed pure language. His interest was contagious, and both Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery manifest a similar longing for what they imagined was the purity of language as delivered by God to Adam in the Garden of Eden. They spoke and wrote frequently concerning their belief that human language had been corrupted through the years, the confounding of the languages at the Tower of Babel being merely the beginning of the deviation from the original purity of the primordial Adamic tongue. In the mind of Phelps and the others, Egyptian was apparently believed to have somehow avoided the confounding of the languages at the Tower of Babel. Egyptian, therefore, became a term that, for them, was synonymous with pure language. Thus, they see no contradiction in titling as Egyptian counting a document that contains not a single element that is Egyptian, nor do they perceive any contradiction in titling the other documents Egyptian alphabet and grammar and alphabet of the Egyptian language, notwithstanding the fact that most of the characters they translate are not Egyptian, nor are the source texts themselves. Again, the evidence strongly...
Okay, so I want to show you, because I thought this was interesting.
The nature of the language of the ancient
he shows
nation,
you
such that it was only understandable.
He shows you a clip from W.W. Phelps' journal where it actually has the same layout of the Kirtland Egyptian papers months before the church. Joseph Smith even has the papyri. I want to try to pull that up real quick. I forgot what. Let's see. I forgot where it was, but it's on here.
By many years was not a revelatory restoring would be like 6 characters followed by a column of sounds.
Okay, so right here, remember these characters right here, okay? Because when I go back to Cameron's video, these same characters, right? Oh, right here. This is what he's talking about. Okay, let me go back. Okay, this is where it is. Okay, W.W. Phelps, right? This is in his own journal, or it's a letter to his wife, right? A specimen of some of the pure language. This is exactly the same setup that we have in the Kirtland Egyptian papers. Okay, so the exact same setup. This is W.W. Phelps. This is before, right? It's the same year. This is months before Joseph Smith buys the papyrus, or months or weeks, right? Before he actually buys or knows anything about the papyri, right? And so W.W. Phelps has this exact same setup right here. And so basically, William Schryver, his hypothesis is that W.W. Phelps is kind of like the main guy behind it. It's like, hey, let's go back to the pure language. Let's try to make something that we can claim is, in homage to, or is akin to the pure language, right? They're not claiming that they know exactly what that is, or that they can, that it's necessarily a real language, but they're trying to pursue something like that, right? Now, if you notice these characters right here, okay, in Cameron Bertuzzi's video, he's going to show these exact same characters, okay? Remember, these characters right here are in a letter that W.W. Phelps wrote to his wife before Joseph Smith even had the papyri, right? These exact same characters end up in the Kirtland Egyptian papers. I think when I found that out, I was like, okay, yeah. So anyone who's claiming the Kirtland Egyptian papers were used to decipher, or sorry, to translate the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham, have no idea what they're talking about, right? This is W.W. Phelps. This is a letter to his wife, and then I'm going to play it, and he's going to show you where these are actually in the Kirtland Egyptian papers.
Here we see a table almost identical in format to those used in the alphabet and grammar. In the left-hand column are written 6 characters, followed by a column of sounds and English explanations that derive from elements of Joseph Smith's previously received revelations. Another intriguing aspect of this table is that 3 of the characters are identical to characters used in the Masonic cipher. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because a little less than 2 months later, Phelps reuses these same 6 characters in the Egyptian alphabet documents.
In the exact same order. The same characters in the exact same order, right? I mean, come on, man.
Not only that, he assigns to these 6 previously used cipher characters 6 new sounds and 6 completely new explanations. In this new cipher key, this new specimen of some of the pure language, the explanations assigned to these manifestly generic characters are related to different previously received revelations, primarily the recently revealed Book of Abraham. The evidence is abundant and compelling. These pure language tables appear to be designed to function as a kind of ideographic cipher and lexicon. Obviously, Phelps introduced dozens more characters when he built the pure language cipher table for the Egyptian alphabet. But the presence of these 6 characters from his earlier specimen confirms the evidence already adduced that a cipher key is precisely what documents are designed to be. They would no doubt have called it a translation key or something like that. In any case, its function is identical to a typical substitution cipher key. We see the exact same characters in exactly the same order, yet with different sounds.
Okay, so I think I'm going to call it here watching this video. I think we're going to go back to Cameron. I'm definitely going to point out when these pop up, because when I saw those on his video, I thought that was interesting. I'm going to pop that up. Let me go through. Here, this is interesting right here. This part, this is on. Let me just play this part.
And explanations. In fact, if we examine closely the way Phelps laid out his Egyptian alphabet document, we can see that he actually provided a column for a single letter substitution value as well. The Phelps Egyptian alphabet document is the only one that has such a column headed letter, and it only contains such a column on the first page, after which Phelps dispensed with it altogether. However, we can see what he initially set out to do. He wrote a letter A in the first line of the column, only to partially erase it and then overwrite an X in its place. Here I have highlighted in red the partially erased and then overwritten letter A, again without the red highlighting. After erasing the A and putting an X in its place, Phelps then makes an X on the next 2 lines, seemingly to emphasize the fact that a single letter substitution was not to be a part of this particular cipher key. Even so, the presence of this letter substitution column confirms the function of this document as a cipher key. He's using what amounts to a generic template. But you see, this
Okay, so I thought that was awesome, right? So basically, the evidence is just stacking on top of each other. These papers were not used to decipher Egyptian. They were not used to translate the Book of Abraham. He's already proved in the first part that the Kirtland Egyptian papers actually require a pre-existing translation of the Book of Abraham to actually be created. Go back and if you want, you can go back and kind of watch where I go through his first part. This is the second part of his presentation. Now he's showing the evidence, and it's piling on top of each other, one piece after piece. It's becoming pretty convincing that the Kirtland Egyptian papers are themselves trying to be a cipher. They're trying to encrypt using these characters, some of which, or the majority of which, are not Egyptian, do not appear on the papyri, which is interesting. Why would Joseph Smith claim to these people who he's saying, look, I'm a prophet, I'm going to be translating this document, let's just make up random characters, not even pull them off of the papyri, and I'm going to claim I'm actually translating the papyri? Doesn't really make sense how they would follow that, right? But that's what he's doing. And the thing is, the person, W.W. Phelps, who's doing this with him, before he even got the documents, he has the same exact setup in his journal, right? So therefore, it's piling on top of each other that this is some sort of cipher, right? So I'm going to skip to and then right here, I like the whole letter thing, and it was going to be letter per letter, but then they said, no, we're not going to do that. So I want to skip to the end to his conclusion. Oh, right here, this is probably really important. So let's look at this part right here. This is where he talks about the Book of Abraham manuscript pages, right? So maybe I should just explain that real quick. 1 second. Okay. So let me pull this up. Okay. I'm going to share this screen instead real quick. Okay. Right here. So Cameron Bertuzzi actually never shows you this document right here. He shows you this one. He never shows you this one. And this is like, I think JSP which is Joseph Smith Papyri 11. I think that's what the name of this document is. So Cameron Bertuzzi, or Capturing Christianity, in his video never actually shows you this. And again, I think he's shooting himself in the foot, because this right here is actually the best argument against the Book of Abraham. Okay, so critics, starting with like Gerald Tanner, I think is his name, and his, whoever his coworker was, whenever this was released, the images of these papyri were released, they took this right here and they took it to an Egyptologist and they had them translate it. And the reason they did that is because they realized, oh, look, these characters right here actually appear. And let me show you this. Share the screen. In the Kirtland Egyptian papers. So if you see this little backwards E thing and these characters right here, they are the exact same right here. There's the backwards E, there's the little thing with the X, and there's that one. Let me go back. I can't pull them up side by side, but there's the backwards E right there. And then look at this one. Here's this little X thing, and that's that right there, right? And so the whole argument here from basically Jared Tanner is, well, look, this is supposedly Abraham on the lion couch. So therefore, and these characters right here actually, show up and are used in the Book of Abraham manuscript, right? They put one of these characters up and they put a couple sentences or a paragraph, and we're just claiming that this is them using this character, and Joseph Smith is dictating them, quote unquote, what the translation is. So therefore, they take that, they took this document right here, and they took it to an Egyptologist and they had him translate it, and it does not come out to be the Book of Abraham, right? And so they say, well, look, this is the conclusive proof, right? And so again, this is what I would say is the best argument against the Book of Abraham. And it's usually what people read, and they have a lot of questions or doubts or whatever. And because these documents, these characters appear in the Kirtland Egyptian papers, right? Or sorry, the Book of Abraham manuscripts, right? And it looks like it's a 1-for-1 translation that Joseph Smith's doing it, and it quote unquote seems conclusive, right? And so Jared Tanner, he's like, well, if you take each one of these characters and you look at the manuscript pages, and like apparently it's a couple sentences or it's a paragraph per each character, he hypothesized that this whole square right here, not over here, just this part right here, it would be basically the whole Book of Abraham as we have it. This would be all 5 chapters, right? So therefore, if this has nothing to do with the Book of Abraham, therefore you can say that Joseph Smith was not a prophet, right? I'm going to get into why that's wrong on a couple levels. We're going to hear William Schryver. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I don't know necessarily how to say that. We're going to get into how he says that's wrong here in a second. And then we're going to get into Tim Barker and his response to Tanner's argument. But this is what I would say is the best argument, right? You have in right here in the Kirtland papers, character per character, you have what they're trying to say is what Joseph Smith translated it as. And then that is on this papyri, which is later translated, and it's not the Book of Abraham, right? But the thing is, there's an issue with that, right? And I'll explain that in a minute. But Cameron Bertuzzi never actually shows you this document. I thought it was interesting. So I think he's kind of shooting himself in the foot with that. He just brings up the Kirtland Egyptian papers, which in part 1 and part 2 that we've just watched of William Schryver's video, he completely kind of does away with that whole argument, right? He shows that the Kirtland Egyptian papers were not used to translate the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham, but rather they actually themselves require a pre-existing translation due to like basically how the definitions are written. They know too much of what's going to be in a supposedly unknown text. And then also all the conclusive evidence that actually it's not actually trying to decipher Egyptian or translate Egyptian. Instead, it's trying to encipher. The whole setup is actually them trying to make some sort of cipher or an homage to this quote unquote understanding of a pure language. So let's see what right here, to finish with this part, let's see what he's saying here. Right here, pictures have to reference the text surrounding them. That's a good point. Let's bring that up, right? So Tanner, his whole argument, right, is that over here, right, is the this is what he's using, because apparently he's like pointing out that there are these different characters in in this line, I think down here too, in the Kirtland Egyptian papers, right? And again, just to be fair, or to be clear, only for the first 2 chapters of the Book of Abraham, or the first 3 chapters of the Book of Abraham. The other chapters that we have, there are no manuscript pages of this one-to-one understanding or quote-unquote translation that Joseph Smith apparently did, according to Tanner. And, I guess he would just shrug that off and say, well, I think he passed away now, so he can't. But I guess his response to that would have been, well, we lost that, or, they did that just a different way, or they didn't record it the same way, right? But if you look at this is the image, right? So the question would be to them, well, if Joseph Smith is assuming, or supposedly this is going to be the Book of Abraham because it's close to the image, why wouldn't he start with these right here, with these characters? And why wouldn't he claim, if he's just making this up, that these are actually the Book of Abraham, right? Why would it be over here and not start with the characters are literally right around the image and then claim, well, yeah, so here's Abraham, and then here's the text starting right here about it. I think that's interesting, right? If he's just making it up, you would think he'd start over here with the text directly surrounding this. Also, in the Book of Abraham, we have reference to basically look back to the image at the beginning of this document. If the text is right next to the image, you wouldn't take space in this to say, look at the image at the beginning of this document. You would just talk about the image because it's right next to it, right? So in the Book of Abraham, it says, at the beginning of this, I've given you a description of this. Again, these 2 things are right next to each other in the papyri scroll. You would just talk about it and they would see it. You wouldn't reference back to it as if you couldn't see it at the moment. And we'll get into that here in a second. Yeah, okay, let's come back over here. We're going to share the screen, and we're going to hear what the William Schryver says right here about the Book of Abraham manuscript and about this whole idea that it was actually they copy a character and then they translate a passage or a verse at a time. He's going to explain here how it's actually part of the cipher understanding. Okay.
The fourth example of a pure language cipher key is the Abraham manuscripts, authored by Frederick G. Williams and Warren Parrish. Just as the Egyptian alphabet cipher key divided the characters into parts and the explanations into degrees, so also the first line of these 2 manuscripts tells us that the characters that follow are designated as being from the second part of this particular cipher key, and they're accompanying.
Okay, so look at this. This is actually at the top of these Abraham manuscripts, right? Sign of the 5th degree of the second part, right? So therefore, you're seeing a direct correlation and connection of the Kirtland Egyptian papers, be it the alphabet or be it the grammar, right? The Kirtland Egyptian grammar paper, and this, right? They're saying, oh, the sign of the 5th degree. I guess I didn't explain this. If you watch his video, he explains that in the Kirtland Egyptian papers, there's like a character, and then apparently that character has a degree in the meaning of 1, a degree in the meaning of 2, on until 5, right? So he's saying right here, he's pointing out how at the top of the Abraham manuscript pages, and I'll actually go to one so you can see, because I pulled that up. I thought it was pretty interesting. Let me see up here. Is this it? Oh, no. Okay, well, I don't have it pulled up right now, but basically this does appear at the top of 2. There's 3 manuscript pages. At the top of 2 of them, it intentionally references sign of the 5th degree in the second part. And the reason I'm pointing this out is it's showing a direct correlation. William here has already shown that the pages, right, in the Egyptian grammar were created, and an alphabet were created from a pre-existing Book of Abraham script, right? If you weren't here for that, you can go back and watch that, and I'll add the links to these videos in the description. If you want to watch these videos, you can go to my channel, go to playlist, and go to Book of Abraham, and these 3 videos that I've been referencing are in that playlist. But basically, he's showing there's a direct correlation, but the grammar pages and the alphabet pages of the Egyptian papers, they have this pre-existing manuscript. So therefore, he's claiming that this is a continuation of that cipher and a continuation of a need for a pre-existing manuscript.
Explanations are designated as being in the 5th degree. Thus, the first cipher character has a substitution value of, I sought for mine appointment unto the priesthood according to the appointment of God unto the fathers concerning the seed. And the second cipher character has a substitution value of, my fathers having turned from their righteousness and from the holy commandments which the Lord their God had given unto them, unto the worshiping of the gods of the heathens. And it goes on with individual characters drawn from the papyri in the fashion John Dee has described, representing entire paragraphs from the text of the Book of Abraham. Well, there is so much more, but the time is exhausted. I've had to leave so much out that I would have preferred to include. I would have liked, for example, to spend at least half an hour detailing the evidence supporting the conclusion that it was William Phelps who was the dominant and driving force behind this entire project. But that will have to wait another day. Starting my presentation today, I cited this entry in the history of the church. In light of the evidence and arguments I have just presented, I want to revisit this sentence and see if perhaps we can now view it a bit differently. We'll divide it into two parts. The first part reads, the remainder of the month I was continually engaged in translating an alphabet to the Book of Abraham. Note well the phrasing. Engaged in translating an alphabet to the Book of Abraham. It refers to the Book of Abraham as a fait accompli, and so it was, as the textual evidence persuasively demonstrates. They began the so-called Egyptian alphabet project focused on the previously received text of the first 3 chapters of the Book of Abraham, then later expanded their focus to others of Joseph Smith's revelations. They were at least partially motivated by the prevailing atmosphere in Kirtland circa 1835, when the need was felt to encrypt sensitive information from Joseph Smith's revelations. In addition, there is a considerable body of historical evidence suggesting their fascination with the notion of a pure language of the ancients. To be sure, in the course of their Cipher project, they employ the term Egyptian, but the text-critical evidence is conclusive on this point. Egyptian simply cannot mean for them, in the context of this project, what we have always believed it to mean. Only when we come to see.
Okay, so I think that's an amazing conclusion right there. So again, you'll have to watch his whole presentation. I didn't have time to include it here. I'm going to have to try to, I guess, wrap up some of this here shortly because it is getting late here where I am. But right here, the Kirtland Egyptian Papers, Part 1 and Part 2 by William Schryver. This is on Fair Latter-day Saints YouTube channel. I think this is pretty conclusive, right? He's over here just knocking away left and right all of these ideas that the critics are using, especially that we see here in Cameron Bertuzzi's video. Okay, so let's let's continue here. Oh, I love this part. Let's watch this.
Atheist. Number 2, pre-mortal existence and intelligences. Abraham 3:22 through 23. Now the Lord has shown unto me, Abraham, the intelligences that were organized before.
Okay, so he says this. So basically right here, he's saying, oh, well, the Book of Abraham is actually really important for them, right? It's completely a fraud, right? That's what he's saying. But the Book of Abraham actually has some really deep doctrine for them that's only in the Book of Abraham, which when he says it, I'm going to tell him, no, that's not true. But basically saying, so if it's fraud, then therefore these doctrines that they hold that are only in the Book of Abraham or that are mainly in the Book of Abraham are just like, have to be thrown out. And so what does that do with their faith?
Abraham 4:1. And then the Lord said, let us go down. And they went down at the beginning, and they, that is the gods, organized and formed the heavens and the earth. In this verse, Joseph Smith depicts the gods shaping and planning creation, a far cry from the singular, all-powerful God of the Bible. This verse and others like it turn Abraham, literally the father of monotheism, into a polytheist. Number 2, pre-mortal.
Okay, so I mean, I don't think there's an issue with this, right? If you read the Book of Moses, which is also in the Pearl of Great Price, it talks about how there is the Father, and then there is the only begotten, right? The Son, who is Christ. We here at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints do not believe in this oneness of being that cannot be described because it's somehow the mystery of the Trinity, and you have to bow to it, but you don't actually know what it means, and you don't know what it is, and it's something that you have to understand philosophically and all that, right? Therefore, we believe that the Trinity is a oneness of purpose, love, unity, and we believe that the Father and Son are 2 distinct beings, right? We basically believe that from the beginning. The Book of the Book of Moses was itself translated in 1830, the same year the Book of Mormon was released, and in the Book of Moses, it talks about how there is the Father and there is the Son, and basically it does imply that both are embodied, at least, and that they are separate beings. So therefore, from early on, right, you have that. It's not just here. And so I don't think this, coming from these Christians who have this like super high, I don't know, the sensitivity to anything that they would say is quote unquote different. It might be shocking, but in the restored gospel, it's not necessarily shocking. But we're not polytheists.
Existence and intelligences. Abraham 3:22 through 23. Now the Lord has shown unto me, Abraham, the intelligences.
And I'm going to show you from Abraham 3 right here how we're not, right? So before he's like, oh, it says the gods, right? And then right here in Abraham 3, I don't know if it's intentional or not, you scroll up 2 verses, it says, it's talking about intelligences, right? And it says, I, the Lord God, I am more intelligent than they all, right? I'm the greatest of them all. And so basically giving the greatness and the power to God, right? So I think it's interesting that he brought that up in Abraham 2 or 4 or whatever, and then did, completely skipped over it right here. But okay, let's continue right here.
That were organized before the world was, and among all these were many of the noble and great ones. In this chapter of the Book of Abraham, Abraham is granted a vision of the pre-mortal existence. In verses 22 through 23, he sees, quote, intelligences that were organized before the world was, and among them many, quote, noble and great ones. This scene is central to Mormon teachings on the pre-mortal life, where all human spirits are believed to have lived in God's presence before being born on earth. This doctrine, if we can call it one, is found nowhere in canonical Jewish or mainstream Christian scriptures. It suggests that people had a pre-mortal life, an idea that Mormons would later make central to their.
Yeah, I mean, so the idea of the gods is biblical, right? Michael Heiser kind of taught that, and then obviously he would say, but Elohim is utterly, completely and utterly different. Again, it doesn't say that in the Bible, but he claims that, and I think personally, I would say he claims that because he believes that himself, but it doesn't necessarily state that in the Bible. I don't think he could ever point to a place in the Bible where it claims that, other than his own interpretation of the New Testament. He couldn't point to the Old Testament where it's talking about how Elohim is completely, utterly different as classic Christianity wants it to be described as. But yeah. Oh.
Their theology. If this text really came from the biblical Abraham, it means the world's three major Abrahamic faiths have been missing huge chunks of doctrine for centuries. If it's not authentic, then all of these new doctrines are grounded in nothing more than.
I mean, that's the whole point, right? The whole point of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ is to actually restore things that were lost and that are not being taught in classic Christianity. You actually did have a church father teach something along or akin to an understanding of pre-existence origin, and then he was later basically shut down and called a heretic for believing that and some other things, right? That's Cameron's finally understanding the point here. We are here to restore truths that are lost and that you don't have. Like that's the whole point of our faith. But yeah, so his main criticism against the Book of Abraham is basically that the Kirtland Egyptian papers are used to translate it. We've proven that's false. And then I want to pull up a couple images here. He's talking. Okay, let's see this right here.
Something called the Kirtland Egyptian papers. This is a set of documents from Joseph Smith's time containing lines of Egyptian symbols from the Book of Abraham.
Oh, he flashes it really quick. I'm going to try to pause it on the here. Let's see. Can I
curtain on something called the Kirtland Egyptian papers? This is a set of documents from Joseph Smith's time containing lines of Egyptian symbols.
Okay, right here. So this part right here is actually going to come back to bite him, right? So he shows you this, right? So this is facsimile 3, I believe, and this is actually how they had it at the time. There were things missing. There were things. It was not a complete thing, and so basically, something that Joseph Smith wanted to do was, I guess, when it was put into the Times and Seasons, he wanted to make this look complete, right? Therefore, I guess they thought that looked good. Some critics try to say that he, by revelation, filled it in. I don't know if that's, if he claimed that. I don't know if that they're just claiming that for him. But basically, he got characters from elsewhere in the documents, in the papyri, and put them in. I'm going to pull up a video here by Tim Barker, who actually is going to show you that around the edge here and over here in certain places that are missing, Joseph Smith actually asked them to place, let's pull it up again. Where is it? He actually asked them to place characters from this document, which, according to Tanner and according to all the critics, this is where the Book of Abraham should be, because in the in the Book of Abraham manuscript pages, they're taking these characters and quote unquote apparently giving translations of them, which William Schryver's told us that that's actually a cipher. It's not actually supposed to be translation. It's them taking a pre-existing translation that they got from Revelation and ciphering it back in. I can go watch that to understand what I'm talking about there. But here, so here it's pretty interesting that Joseph Smith asked them to take these characters, and then he puts them back into this right here. And I'll show you this in a second. He uses the characters from JSP 11, which Tanner and all the critics say is what he actually uses to translate the Book of Abraham, or what he translated the Book of Abraham from that document. He fills this in with those characters, and every spot where he fills in characters from that papyri, he gives it as a definition or as an explanation for those locations, for those characters. saying the Lord has yet to reveal these. So the best argument against the Book of Abraham, right? And I'll show you this all here in a second with Tim Barker's video, is that these documents right here, these characters right here from this document, JSP 11, the claim is that this is the Book of Abraham and has nothing to do with it. But we have Joseph Smith himself saying, hey, you know these characters right here? God is yet to reveal these, because when he asked them to fill in these characters right here, that's how he defines them. He defines them as the Lord has yet to reveal them at this time. I don't know what these mean, which seems like a pretty ballsy move if you just literally had, people to sit down and write out this character and then you give a translation and then you say, oh, this is what this means. It's a whole paragraph. And then you later fill it in and the people know it's the same characters. And you say, hey, actually, God hasn't revealed this yet. Right. And then someone can say, well, he just means it was erased. And so he filled it in and God hasn't defined the erase bit yet. Right. Cause it was all bored out. Right. Or it was all erased out or scratched out. Right. I can see someone saying that. They can say, well, if you see it's all erased out, it's all scratched out. So therefore he doesn't know what it was supposed to be. So he filled in to make it look good. Well, the thing is, and I'll show you, Joseph Smith replaced and filled in here, and he commented on undamaged and damaged parts, right? He filled in certain things, and then he gave definitions for what those characters mean that were damaged, and then other ones he didn't. But every character that came from JSP 11, he said the Lord has yet to reveal what this means. So again, if that doesn't make sense, I'll show that with Tim Barker here in a second. So let's jump back to Cameron Bertuzzi's video. And so I just thought that was interesting that he put that, because this can come back to bite him in the butt, because the best argument against the Book of Abraham requires him to have translated JSP 11. This right here is going to show us that he does not actually know what JSP 11 says, because the Lord has, quote unquote, yet to reveal it.
From the Book of Abraham papyri, and next to each symbol are entire paragraphs of English translation. Here's why this is a big deal. Modern Egyptology, which
okay, right here, right?
From the Book of Abraham papyri, and next to each symbol are entire paragraphs of English translation. Here's why this is a big deal. Modern.
Okay, right here. Actually, give me a second. Is this the same thing as? I think he got this wrong. Give me a second here. Oh my gosh! Look at this! Look at this! Okay, I just noticed this. So Cameron Bertuzzi, this right here has nothing to do with the Egyptian papers. This was a letter written by W.W. Phelps. This right here is in the Egyptian papers. This up here, right, was written by W.W. Phelps and a letter sent to his wife before any manuscripts were bought by Joseph Smith, any of these papyri, right, before they even knew about Michael Chandler, right? And so he made this and sent this to his wife because he was an advocate. Like, he was this guy who wanted to pursue the pure language. He had this goal to kind of make something akin to it, right? And so if you see right here, this is the exact same thing. So in this Capturing Christianity video, he actually inserts something that is disproving his own. This is the second time he's disproving his own theory here, because this document right here that he's showing up is the exact same one that we have here, that is actually from W.W. Phelps. It's a letter written to his wife before any of the Egyptian paper things were written, before Joseph Smith acquired the papyri. This is him himself just making a cipher, right? And so I thought that's pretty interesting. So this actually has nothing to do with the Egyptian papers. This is just W.W. Phelps writing something to his wife, and it has the exact same. It's the exact same thing. So this actually is not part of Joseph Smith's Kirtland Egyptian papers. And if you see, these things right here have nothing to do with the papyri. But
Egyptology, which can accurate
right here, like he provides both of them. It's the exact same thing. This is crazy. Okay, I just noticed this. He provides both W.W. Phelps' letter and then the same symbols put into the and he shows them back to back. That's crazy. So he shows W.W. Phelps' letter and then shows the same symbols in the Kirtland Egyptian papers. So again, I want to say this is a mistake, right? I don't know why he would put this like this. And I'm guessing maybe this is, I don't know how he got those two documents and why he put them back to back, But those two documents back to back are literally disproving his own argument. His whole argument here is, oh, look, Joseph Smith just used the Egyptian papers to translate the Book of Abraham. But he just showed something that was not in the Egyptian papers, that was written months or weeks or months before the Egyptian papers even started, before Joseph Smith even had the papyri, and then it has the exact same characters, right? If you saw the characters that were in the other one, we've already proven this here in the video. Go back and watch it. It's exact same characters, and here they are again in exact same order with different definitions. Like, let's go back and watch that.
Book of Abraham papyri, and next to each symbol are entire paragraphs of English translation.
Oh,
here's why this is a big deal.
Okay, right here. This is the letter W.W. Phillips sent to his wife. Nothing to do with the Book of Abraham. The exact same 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These 6 characters, his definitions.
Modern Egyptology, which can
the exact same 6 characters, and then these are the definitions that they give in the Book of Abraham cipher. I think that's crazy. Again, he's completely undermined in his own video his own argument, because this is the proof that William Schryver is using to conclude this is actually not a translation. This is actually just a cipher. And he just put in the exact evidence that he used in his video to claim that in this video, trying to prove this is some sort of translation. That's crazy. Okay.
Accurately read hieroglyphs confirms that each Egyptian character is typically just a word or part of a word, not entire sentences. Yet Joseph Smith appears to assign whole chunks of text to single characters.
Again, this is his main argument, right? His whole main argument is, well, look, he's actually trying to define each little character. We've proven that these papers right here, the Kirtland Egyptian papers, alphabet and grammar, require a pre-existing script. If you didn't see that, please go back. We used William Schryver's part 1 and part 2 in understanding the Kirtland Egyptian papers to prove that the Kirtland Egyptian papers required a pre-existing translation of the Book of Abraham. So therefore, they could not have been used to translate. Again, or after that, William Schryver uses concludes that the Kirtland Egyptian papers is actually a cipher, right? And then he provided evidence using W.W. Phillips' journal, and Cameron just put that in his own video, undermining his whole argument there. I think that's awesome, because truth is going to be truth. So he was putting that in there, and it's proving him false,
suggesting he was inventing or reverse engineering his translation. This is exactly what critics like Gerald and Sandra Tanner pointed out in the 1960s when they got copies of these papers. And guess how the Mormon Church reacted? By keeping these manuscripts in their archives away from the general public for decades, until they were effectively leaked. This is one of many reasons scholars now say the Book of Abraham could not be what Joseph Smith claimed.
So, I mean, that's the claim he's making, that the church has kept these hidden. The thing is, the Tanners actually had a better argument. I've already presented the argument, and he didn't provide that whole argument. Again, I think he made his own argument weaker here without providing to the masses. Apparently, if he's trying to promote this as some sort of fraud, he provided a weaker argument than he could have, because the Tanner's argument, I believe, is a lot stronger. But I'm going to undermine that here in a second with what Tim Barker is going to show us.
But let's keep going, because the biggest bombshell came in the 1960s when the original papyri were rediscovered. In 1966, curators at the Metropolitan Museum of Art discovered fragments of papyrus that once belonged to Joseph Smith. In 1967, they returned these fragments.
Okay, look, he's never going to show you JSP 11. For some reason, he keeps showing you these other documents, but it's not JSP 11, which Tanner himself, the main argument is it's that exact document that is the Book of Abraham. So again, I think he's just shooting himself in the foot and actually presenting a weaker argument by not actually showing Tanner's argument.
Fragments to the Mormon Church. For the first time in over a century, modern Egyptologists could directly study the exact scrolls from which Joseph claimed to have translated the Book of Abraham. And surprise, surprise, every expert determined that these were not.
Again, it's not the exact scrolls, right? So he's going to try to brush off the missing scroll theory. We're going to hear how he does that, and then we're going to jump over to Tim Barker, and we're going to end with him because it is getting late here where I am. But we're going to end with Tim Barker's basically taking Tanner's argument of, well, there can't be a missing scroll, it has to be JSP 11, and then taking that to Egyptologists, and then basically claiming Joseph Smith has to be a false prophet. We're going to take that argument, which is the most concise and most powerful argument against the Book of Abraham, and Tim Barker just completely destroys that. So let's hear how he kind of tries to brush off the missing scroll theory, because Tim Barker kind of supports that theory as well. At least he gives evidence to support that, so we'll see.
Not Abraham's writings at all. They turned out to be funerary texts, including something called the Book of Breathings, an Egyptian work intended to help the deceased navigate the afterlife. They even mentioned a dead man named Hor, not Abraham. Now, if you're thinking surely this forced the Mormon Church to repudiate the Book of Abraham, well, let's see how they handled it. Before I continue, I just want to say, if you're finding this content helpful, or if you appreciate these deep dives in theology, take a moment to subscribe to Capturing Christianity, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments. We've got.
Okay, so he sat here and he's not presented the best argument, and the argument he's presenting, we've proven, is falling flat. So it's not the best argument here. Okay.
1860s, the evidence was becoming undeniable. The surviving papyrus fragments didn't match Joseph Smith's Book of Abraham. When the Mormon Church finally published photographs of these papyri in the Improvement Era magazine, they had to acknowledge they were standard funerary texts, a major blow to the old claim that these scrolls literally contained Abraham's writings. Yet, instead of repudiating the Book of Abraham, church leaders pivoted. Two principal theories emerged to reconcile the facts. Number one, the missing scroll theory. And number two, the catalyst theory. We're going to see how the Mormon Church officially
Okay, so the missing scroll theory is that there is a scroll that we don't have that was burnt in the Chicago fire, and that is where Joseph Smith got the Book of Abraham. The thing is, we have people who are eyewitnesses saying, "Oh, look, there are two scrolls, and on these scrolls contain the writings of Abraham." We literally have eyewitnesses saying that. People who are there in the know doing this, translating this with Joseph Smith, right? Show us on the papyri where Joseph Smith heard you. That's a good one. So we actually have eyewitness. And here's the thing: Christians, right? These mainstream Christians, these Protestants, these Catholics who think that they have all the answers. They either get offended or they get hurt or they get scared that we're gonna, God forbid, convert somebody to the restored gospel of Jesus Christ and help them, seek out a desire to live a more Christ-like life. They like to Christian-splain, right? They like to sit here and tell us what we believe and tell us what's right and wrong, and they don't actually want to trust the eyewitnesses. And the thing is, they do the same thing with the eyewitnesses of the Book of Mormon, the gold plates, of the angel, and they like to tell us what these guys thought instead of actually just reading their own words and realizing, oh crap, these people utterly believed what they wrote and what they saw and what they held. And it's actually better evidence than what we have for the resurrection. And we have good evidence for the resurrection. So, what do we do with their statements? They don't actually let us speak or let the eyewitnesses in our history, in our church history, speak. So the eyewitnesses of the Book of Abraham all say there was a scroll, one or two, and on that scroll, right, there is, they claimed, is the Book of Abraham, right? So which is my personal choice for best theory? So the catalyst theory, I think, is kind of, I don't know. I just think the catalyst theory is just convenient, and I think critics think that. And so, you can believe that if you want. I think the missing scroll theory, for me, it personally would be the one that I would choose because there are eyewitnesses saying, "Oh, look, there's two scrolls that had them, and there were other, parts of papyrus too." And then the scrolls we can track down to the Chicago Museum, which got destroyed in the Chicago fire. So yeah. So the catalyst theory, in my opinion, is just, it's convenient, and it's not necessarily, yeah. Are there no other theories? No, I mean, unless you believe the theory that the critics hold that JSP 11 is actually the translation of, where they got the Book of Abraham, and it's wrong, right? So there's three. You could just say there's three theories. JSP 11 is actually where he got the Book of Abraham, and somehow all the Egyptologists are wrong. I think that would be hard to argue. There's the missing scroll theory, and then the catalyst theory, in my opinion, is just he believed he was having a translation, but he wasn't actually translating. God just gave him revelation. I think that's convenient. You can argue that. Please argue that. Write some articles, try to convince people if you believe that. I think missing scroll theory, personally, for me, has more weight behind it. Okay, so we admit that the scrolls do not contain the Book of Abraham. Yes, right. Even apologists will say this. Let me clarify by saying yes. This document right here, right? So this is what we have today. This does not contain the Book of Abraham, but this right here is not the long scrolls, right? These would be the other documents that they said. They said there was like one or two long scrolls that contain the records of Abraham, and there were other documents as well. I'm going to play and put on the screen here where there's eyewitness who states that, right? And so this is what the critics say, since we have this extent, since apparently these characters show up in the Book of Abraham manuscripts, they're saying that this right here is has to be the Book of Abraham, and they translated this through Egyptologists, and it has nothing to do with Abraham. So they say Joseph Smith has to be a false prophet, right? So both apologists, right, both believing Latter-day Saints and critics agree this is not the Book of Abraham, right? So critics say, well, you have to say this is the Book of Abraham because of these, Book of Abraham manuscripts. And so because this isn't the right translation, this doesn't say anything about Abraham, he's false, right? We would say this is not the Book of Abraham because, for me, there are scrolls that got burnt in the Chicago fire because there are eyewitnesses who said it was on the longer scrolls. So, man, so you jumped in a little late. We talked about this whole issue, right? So we talked about this, and so basically, if you want, you can go back to the video. We walk through William Schryver's, I don't have to say his last name. We walk through his two-part presentation. The first part proves that this Egyptian alphabet was actually created with a pre-existing Book of Abraham translation. Therefore, it was not used to translate the Book of Abraham. And then the second part proves that it's actually not trying to decipher Egyptian and actually give us real Egyptian. Instead, it's actually a cipher to encipher information. And it's pretty conclusive and all that stuff. Right here, the facsimile is incorrect. So why does the church keep it in the canon? Sorry, Kim. No, you're totally fine. So the facsimile stuff, is interesting, right? That is Joseph Smith's understanding of the different things, right? He's saying, look, these, this here means this here means this. I have no problem supporting the apologist explanation to that, which would be, basically, if there is this longer scroll that has the Book of Abraham script on it, they could be using the facsimile, basically appropriating it to mean their own certain thing, right? So they're using this image that is an Egyptian image, and they're using that to represent Abraham trying to be slain, right? The original image here is not trying to show Abraham being slain, but they're appropriating that image to relate to that story and that sort of thing. And so all the other things on there would also be appropriated. Like that or not, that's totally fine. But I have no problem with this being in the canon. I think the Book of Abraham goes very well with other things like D&C 93, which talks about preexistence, which talks about intelligences, and all that stuff. So therefore, the Book of Abraham being in the canon is totally fine. I don't think the facsimile issue is necessarily wrong. I think the best argument against the Book of Abraham is this one right here, claiming that this is in actuality where the Book of Abraham should be, and it's not, so therefore it falls flat. I think this criticism falls flat, right? Because I'm going to prove that here in a second. So, okay. Talking a lot, and I got to get through this because it's like 12:30 here. Okay, so let's hear how he just throws off the book, the missing scroll theory, and then let's see what happens.
Respond to this in a minute. But let's first debunk each of these theories in turn and explain why they both collapse under the weight of Joseph Smith's own writings. Now, first, the missing scroll theory suggests that the actual text containing Abraham's story was on another portion of the papyrus that's now lost. Since the rediscovered fragments don't mention Abraham, proponents claim Joseph Smith must have worked from a different section, one we simply don't have today. On the surface, this might sound somewhat plausible.
Yeah, because there's eyewitnesses telling us that there were longer scrolls, and it was from those longer scrolls that they got the Book of Abraham.
At least to some people. But here's the catch. Joseph Smith's own notebooks, sometimes called the Egyptian alphabet and grammar, include images of the exact Egyptian characters that correspond directly to the published verses of the Book of Abraham. We can literally...
Again, he's going back to this argument, and we've already proven, right, that we've seen conclusive proof and evidence that the Egyptian alphabet and grammar documents were not used to translate the Book of Abraham into English, and that the manuscript pages themselves actually are directly correlated and related to those documents. So therefore, they themselves are part of this cipher understanding. So it's not actually trying to translate each character into English, but instead it's trying to encipher or encrypt, I would say, the English into those characters, which again is weird. You can say it's weird, but his argument here is falling flat, and he himself actually provided proof in his own video with the W.W. Phelps letter, and then right after the same 6 characters in the Book of Abraham manuscript and how they had different translations. I think that was crazy. He didn't obviously. Again, he's kind of a copy and paste critic, so he didn't actually know what was in those because he probably didn't really look into LDS scholarship per se. He probably just got all this from critical sources. But yeah, I think it was interesting that in his own video he put something in there that completely undermines his whole argument. But basically, he's saying there can't be another script because we have what he has, and it's supposed to be Egyptian and it's not, or we have what he has and it relates back to what we have now and it's not correct. So let's jump over to Tim Barker and let's see how he basically upholds, kind of, again, I don't know if he personally upholds it, but he gives evidence or to uphold the lost scroll theory, and then also he completely debunks Tanner's argument with that JSP 11 has to be the source material for the Book of Mormon. So let me just kind of jump around real quick. This is Tim Barker. I don't know him personally. Okay, right here. Let's listen to this part.
Comes from W.W. Phelps, who wrote a letter to his wife Sally in Missouri 3 weeks after Chandler arrived. Phelps wrote, "There were 2 papyrus rolls besides some other ancient Egyptian writings with them."
Okay, 2 papyrus rolls along with other Egyptian writings with them. Sounds like those 2 rolls are pretty important.
These papyrus rolls, according to Phelps, contain the records of Joseph and Abraham.
Okay, so according to Phelps, the rolls, the 2 papyrus rolls contain the writings of Jacob and Abraham. I think that's what he said. But we don't have the rolls. The rolls were given to the Chicago Museum and they burned in the Chicago fire, right? So we don't have those. So therefore, the claim that we have the exact source material in these papyrus today that Joseph Smith used to translate the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham, or from which he translated the Book of Abraham, it's just not accurate, right? We have eyewitnesses, especially W.W. Phelps, who is the main driver behind this whole Kirtland Egyptian papers, right? He's saying, look, these long scrolls, this is where the Book of Abraham is. And then we don't have that today. I don't know who that is. You might have to give a definition. Robert Jenner did not agree with the missing scroll theory. What are your thoughts on Rittner and his so I honestly I don't know. He's probably done some analysis. I'm just showing you what I've seen. This is some more recent. The William Schryver came out in 2022. This came out in 2021. So these are more recent apologetic answers. I think that's pretty conclusive. If you want to give a brief description of what he said about the missing scroll theory, I'd love to comment on that, but I have not read his stuff. Okay, let's continue.
Whether both were on the same scroll or one on each is not clearly specified by Phelps. In December 1835, Oliver Cowdery wrote to William Fry, similarly stating that there were 2 rolls of papyrus, with 2 or 3 other small pieces of papyrus, with astronomical calculations, epitaphs, etc., were found with others of the mummies. He also stated that the writings of Abraham and Joseph were beautifully written on papyrus with black and a small part red ink or paint in perfect preservation. Again, it isn't entirely clear whether both records were on the same scroll or on separate rolls of papyri based on these observations, but Cowdery does state that Abraham and Joseph's writings included black and red ink. By 1842, some of the fragments of papyri were already preserved in a chest of drawers and framed in glass. Henry Caswell.
Okay, so something interesting that he said that Oliver Cowdery said is that let me just play it again.
Based on these observations, but Cowdery does state that Abraham and Joseph's writings included black and red ink. By 18...
Okay, so Abraham and Joseph's writings contained black and red ink. So something that Tim Barker is going to say later on is none of the extant papyri that we have has black and red ink on it, right? So we have 2 people here giving definitions or describing where we get these the translation of the Book of Abraham. One person says, look, it's on a scroll with black and red ink, or papyrus with black and red ink. The other person says, look, we have 2 scrolls, and it's from these scrolls, or at least one of them, that we get the Book of Abraham, right? Nothing we have extant is defined as a long scroll, and nothing that we have extant has black and red ink, right? So therefore, critics just have to kind of throw these out and say, oh, these people didn't know what they're doing. Even though Oliver Cowdery was actually someone who was a scribe during the Egyptian documents, W.W. Phelps was probably the main, figurehead, pushing this whole thing through and encouraging it. But they don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea where Joseph Smith is reading these characters off of, apparently. But they give eyewitness accounts, right? So Tanner throws them out. Capturing Christianity doesn't provide this at all to his audience. I wonder why. Probably because it's a lot harder just to shoo away eyewitness testimony from the people who were there. How would you not agree with the missing scroll theory, seeing that we have eyewitness accounts of the papyri and their enormous size, which are missing and can be traced back to the fire? Dude, amen, dude. The thing is, they just do, because it's convenient, and because if they disagree with it and they say, so the whole thing is, it is somewhat of a convincing argument when you say, look, in the Book of Abraham manuscript documents, right, we have certain characters, and then we have now in our possession an existing papyri where we see that those characters are coming from, right? So therefore, that is the argument. They say this is, because we have it in the Abraham manuscript documents, this has to be where he gets it from. This does not have anything to do with the Book of Abraham when you translate it, so therefore it's all fake, right? So it's a convincing argument until you start looking into eyewitness testimony, right? Which would be, how could they get this wrong, right? Until you look into William Schryver's argument, which is, actually, if you look at it, these documents require a pre-existing script. So there's so many things that when you look into it beyond just the base level criticism, these criticisms actually are not the nail in the coffin. They're not actually the end all be all, Mormonism's false due to this one thing claim that Cameron Bertuzzi, Capturing Christianity, seems to make it, and other critics seem to make it. Okay, so I let's go a little bit more.
42. Some of the fragments of papyri were already preserved in a chest of drawers and framed in glass. Henry Caswell, an Anglican clergyman visiting Nauvoo, wrote, Joseph proceeded to what appeared to be a small chest of drawers. From this, he drew forth a number of glazed slides like picture frames containing sheets of papyrus with Egyptian inscriptions and hieroglyphics. In no uncertain terms, Caswell observed JSP1, or facsimile 1 in the Book of Abraham, as part of this collection of papyrus fragments framed in glass. Quote, pointing to the figure of a man lying on a table, he, Joseph, said, that is a picture of Abraham on the point of being sacrificed. That man standing by him with the drawn knife is an idolatrous priest of the Egyptians. Abraham prayed to God, who immediately unloosed his bands and delivered him, end quote. So no later than 1842, the number of papyrus fragments, either ends of rolls that were damaged and or some of the other papyri that Phelps and Cowdery referred to, were preserved in glass frames and cabinet drawers. This is further confirmed 2 years later, and a month before Joseph's martyrdom, when Josiah Quincy Jr. and Charles Francis Adams visited Nauvoo, and Quincy wrote, some parchments inscribed with hieroglyphics were then offered to us. They were preserved under glass and handled with great respect. We know, however, that not all of the papyri were framed in glass. On February 19, 1843, Charlotte Haven wrote to her mother about her visit in Nauvoo and described her experience with the mummies and papyri, explaining that Lucy Mack Smith opened a long roll of papyrus on top of a long table, set her candlestick down, and explained that the roll contained the writings of Abraham and Isaac. Either Lucy or Charlotte probably meant Abraham and Joseph. Charlotte also mentioned seeing another roll of papyrus. There are other eyewitnesses.
Okay, so Lucy Mack, the mother of the prophet Joseph Smith, she turned to a long table, set her candlestick down, and opened a long roll of manuscript, saying it was the writing of Abraham and Isaac. Apparently, it's supposed to be Abraham and Joseph. She got that wrong. But so again, we have a testament to a scroll. So basically, with the other testimonies, he's like, they did have things that were under glass. They had parts of these papyri that were under glass that were separated, but they also had scrolls. And, we have numerous witnesses telling us that the roll or the scroll is where the Book of Abraham comes from, and that it's from that scroll that has, red and black ink, all that sort of stuff. So the eyewitnesses seem to not let us think that what we have today that's extant are where he actually got the translation of the Book of Abraham from.
Witness accounts, but I will not permit further exploration here. And that's certainly been addressed previously as well. My purpose is to point out that there were 2 rolls of papyrus separate from the fragments of papyri that were preserved in glass frames. It seems that the fragments preserved under glass comprised a lot of papyri that were sold that were eventually sold to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1947, while the 2 rolls and some other fragments would eventually end up in Woods Museum in Chicago and subsequently burned in the Great Chicago of 1871.
Okay, so that's the argument right there. That's the missing scroll, right? So we have scrolls. Eyewitnesses tell us that's from those scrolls that he got the Book of Abraham. There were also other things, and the papyri was divvied up. One museum, the Schryver Fire, got the scrolls and probably some other stuff, and then another museum, I forgot where he said it was, got mainly what was under glass, and what we have today. And so the Chicago Fire destroyed the Chicago Museum, destroying the scrolls inside. So we don't have those, right? So that is the missing scroll theory. The eyewitnesses tell us that was from there, but now it's gone because it got destroyed in the fire. So there's that. Now, as I've stated before, let me say it real quickly, the main argument from the critics is that because here in the Book of Abraham manuscript pages, they have characters that are directly from right here, JSP 11, that therefore JSP 11 has to be the source text and must be the source text of all of the Book of Abraham. When they translate this, it has nothing to do with Abraham. Therefore, they say the Book of Abraham is a fraud or is false, or that Joseph Smith was lying or completely and utterly deceived. Basically saying that no way could he be a true prophet. But let's see here. But we're going to come back to Tim Barker's argument, and we're going to see what he has to say about that. So he basically gives the definition of the whole thing, right? The Egyptologists and apologists say the same thing. The document of breathing made by Isis is not the Book of Abraham, right? So here is what I just showed, the JSP 11, and both Egyptologists and faithful apologists say, yeah, this is not it, right? And we say that for different reasons, right? They say it's not it because they've translated it and it's false, but this is where he got it, so therefore he's a false prophet. And we say, well, no, this isn't it because this is not actually the source, characters for the document. So right here, let me see this real quick. I didn't have this saved. I'm trying to. Okay, right here. So this is the Grant Heward and Gerald Tanner argument. The Egyptian has been translated. It has no recognizable connection with the subject matter of the Book of Abraham, right? And so let's go back a little bit. Why do they say this it's from here? I'm just trying to get him. He has a slide right here. Okay. Because there is the W.W. Phelps, Frederick Williams, and Warren Parrish. And so basically he's saying these characters right here come from JSP 11. And so Grant Heward and Jared Tanner, they hypothesized that this whole thing would be going at the rate of translation, being one character to like a whole verse or whole paragraph. This whole thing would be the Book of Abraham, and they translated it and it's not true. So that's the argument against it. Let's see here. Okay, so here is the argument against the 60-year-old argument against the Book of Mormon, right? So that was made in like the 1960s, I think. I hate jumping back and forth, but I just want to see. Yeah, so 1968, right? So it's almost been 60 years since they came out with this argument that, like, look, we have the source text and it's not true, right? So here, this argument right here goes completely against what he has to say. So as I pointed out, Cameron Bertucci, Capturing Christianity, had in his video this image right here. And this is going to be the downfall of his other argument, right? Or I guess the best argument against the Book of Mormon. This is where it falls apart. Okay, so this is what they had originally. It was scratched out. It was not complete. And so to print it in the Times and Seasons and what we now have, they went back and they filled it in, right? Well, the whole thing is they went back and they filled it in with other characters from other parts of the papyri, right? And so we're going to skip forward here, and Tim Barker is going to show you how right here, all of these right here, at 12, 14, this part here, all along the rim here, came from JSP 11. So all of these characters right here came from the document that Tanner, right, 60 years ago said, oh, this is the source text of the Book of Mormon. This has to be where Joseph Smith got it because these characters are in the Abraham manuscript documents. And the thing is, Tanner themselves actually pointed this out. Tanner himself pointed out that Joseph Smith actually filled in facsimile 3 with these characters from that document, but he didn't make the leap. Or probably he didn't intentionally didn't want to, and that's what Tim Barker's going to do. So he's showing you how these documents actually are, where they are in this manuscript. So here's JSP 11. He's showing you how Joseph Smith got these from JSP 11. I don't know if he himself did it, but basically he asked him to do this and put these on here. Okay. Here's this right here. He's showing you where he got these. And boom. Okay, this is the best part right here. So Joseph Smith, in his explanations of what this whole thing right here is saying, right? There were damaged figures and there were undamaged figures, right? We obviously saw that this whole part right here was damaged. So Joseph Smith gave definitions, right? Or explanations to undamaged figures. And here's the number. He also gave explanations to damaged figures that they filled in, right? And then he withheld explanations from undamaged and also damaged figures. Okay. The most interesting thing is every damaged figure that he filled in from JSP 11, he said the following. The above translation is given as far as we have the right to give at this time, right? About these explanations right here, all of which came from JSP 11, the Lord will be given in the own due time of the Lord, right? So Joseph Smith himself said he does not know what these are because they will be given in the own due time of the Lord, and the above translation is given as far as we have the right to give at this time. So Joseph Smith himself talks about the characters from JSP 11 that he does not have a translation for them. Again, you have to be pretty ballsy as a, quote unquote, a prophet to come off and say, I'm going to sit down with these people who believe in me as a prophet, take one character and make them translate a whole paragraph out of it, and then take that same character and put it into this document and then say, I don't know what this means, right? Because again, this is the hypothesis that Jared Tanner has. He says that Joseph Smith used this whole page right here for the Book of Abraham, right? Even though we only have the first couple lines in the manuscript pages, the hypothesis that he gives is he would have used this whole script because this is what he's saying the source text for the Book of Abraham is. But yet Joseph Smith is taking the supposed source text and saying, we don't know what this is because the Lord hasn't revealed it, right? So I think that's pretty conclusive, right? Joseph Smith himself is commenting on these characters that Tanner and all the other critics since them have said, oh, it has to be using this to translate the Book of Mormon. He's saying, no, the Lord has yet to reveal this. Now, I would admit, right, going back to this page right here, this part right here, if he simply just never gave an explanation to any of the damaged characters, I would say that this argument wouldn't actually have that much weight. But the fact that he did give explanations to both undamaged and damaged characters or figures over here, and that every figure that he put in from JSP 11, he simply did not give an explanation to, saying that it would be given later in the own due time of the Lord, to me, that makes it have a little bit more weight, right? So, yeah, I think this is a pretty interesting development in talking about the Book of Abraham. And his whole thing right here, let's see, says, translating the Book of Abraham, the answer under our heads, right? He's saying this has been under our noses since the whole, since the beginning, right? And that Tanner himself actually points this out when he makes this initial critique and argument against the Book of Abraham back in 1968, that, Joseph Smith also used this to fill in Facsimile 3. Obviously, he wasn't going to make the connection himself, or maybe he just didn't see it, that Joseph Smith said, I don't know what these mean, which would have obviously harmed his own position, right? So given that, the best argument against the Book of Abraham is that JSP 11 is the source text, and then we have Joseph Smith saying, this will be given in the own due time of the Lord. The above translation is given as far as we have right to give at the present time. I think it's pretty conclusive. That plus the whole idea that the Kirtland Egyptian papers were created from a pre-existing text, not actually trying to use them to translate the papyri into English, and that it actually appears to be a cipher spearheaded by W.W. Phelps. I think that the whole idea that the Book of Abraham is the coffin, the nail in the coffin for Mormonism can just completely, false, right? I think if you sit in an echo chamber of purely, critical understanding and critical arguments against the Book of Abraham, then sure. But when you start looking into this recent scholarship from, a believing apologetic, side, you start seeing, oh, well, these critiques and these arguments are actually getting chipped away at. And, again, Joseph Smith would have to look at these people in the face and say, hey, I just translated this to you in your face, and I'm going to tell you God didn't actually tell me what this meant. So I think it's kind of interesting. Okay. Yeah. So to some people, the catalyst theory makes sense. That's totally fine. I go ahead and go back to the missing scroll. I think that's pretty good. Nathaniel, I wasn't able to pull up what the one guy said. I'll do that later. And if I make another video responding to that, then by all means I'll do that. But yeah, you asked a question. Let me come back up here. Did Joseph Smith understand any Egyptian at all? I don't think he needed to, right? He didn't claim to understand Reformed Egyptian, but yet he translated the Book of Mormon by the gift and power of God. There's a quote. It was actually in this presentation, but I didn't have time to pull it up. But basically, it was someone saying that they were pinning down the translation of the Book of Abraham from the papyri as given by heaven, right? So therefore, it was again not a scholarly translation, but it was through the gift and power of God through heaven that Joseph Smith was translating the papyri. So no, he never claimed to understand Egyptian, and he never claimed that it was a scholarly translation, right? So I don't think he needed to have translation. Okay. You keep comparing the book to the wrong sources. The papyri we have are not the source of the Book of Abraham. Is that to me? I mean, that's been what I'm saying this whole time. That's my argument, that we don't have them. So I don't know if you were maybe responding to someone else. Let's see. Are not on. Okay, so that's basically it. If you're joining in now, we've basically gone through the main arguments that completely go against Cameron Bertuzzi. I don't know how to say that. Capturing Christianity's arguments against the Book of Abraham. Right, his claim is that this is Mormonism's greatest fraud, and it's been exposed. But yet, in his own video, we've seen things that he's actually put in here that undermine his whole claims about how Joseph Smith, quote unquote, translated the Book of Mormon, the Book of Abraham. And then we've seen recent scholarship, one from 2001, one from 2002, one from 2021, one from 2022, giving us the most recent apologetic arguments against these criticisms and arguments that are brought up by the critics. I think they're pretty convincing. So please go back and review that. I'll have later on, I'll add the links to the 3 videos that we watched in the description. But if you want them now, you can go to my channel, go to playlist, and go down to Book of Abraham. And the 3 videos we watched are part of that playlist. There's a total of like 5 videos there. But yeah, so again, I see on Reddit, I see on YouTube comments, I see on all these things whenever Mormonism is brought up, oh, but the Book of Abraham, right? And the thing is, some of the most recent scholarship that we have from a believing standpoint is whittling away big time at all of these critical arguments. So that again, if you sit in an echo chamber, you believe that your side is impenetrable, right? That it's so strong, and that can be for both believing sides and critical sides of the church and of the truth claims, right? So I think everybody needs to have some humility in understanding why critics can believe what they believe and can think what they think, but also there needs to be humility in understanding, well, we can believe and have faith, and obviously your criticisms aren't holding up to some of the most recent things that we're seeing, right? So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. Okay, let's see here. Just going through the comments. Yeah, this is true. They refuse to study it and merely regurgitate lies. I mean, I think the prophet called them out, right? Lazy learners. I mean, it's a pretty accurate statement, but they don't like that. They push back against that. Let's see. It's only messy if you make it so. Actually, it's quite clear when you study it. No, I mean, so it has been, for some, right? It's a shelf breaker for some, right? That's true. But I think, again, some people, they just get in. And again, the prophet said the same. He had this quote saying, "Don't rehearse your doubts." Basically with doubters, right? Don't rehearse your doubts with people who themselves are just sitting there doubting, or themselves are just angry at the church, right? Because when you do that, you feel solidified in that. But yet, as I've proven here, some of the most recent scholarship, and it's not even recent, we're in 2025, this came out 4 and 3 years ago, is giving us some pretty eye-opening understandings of how these arguments that are quote unquote stone, rock solid, are crumbling right under their feet. But again, they would never provide this argument or provide you with this evidence, or these ideas to therefore question what they've said. They're just going to keep rehearsing what they've already shared. Let's see. Let's see here. The Book of Mormon sort of sifts out the people that would be bothered. But that's pretty funny. Okay. Let's see. Okay, that's a good one. Okay. Let's see here. Well, I think that's going to be it for me. It's pretty late here. It's like 1 a.m. So thanks for sticking around. Thanks for coming in. Hopefully, it's a 2-hour long video. It's not short. It's not concise, but hopefully walking through a critic's video and then showing you, evidence and proof given by apologists that basically are correcting everything he's saying. Hopefully that is eye-opening. Hopefully that gives you some support, some help, some strength to your faith, and actually some weapons to use against critics to pull out and if you need to, or to help those in need who are struggling with this. So yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much. Y'all have a good one. This is Read It Bomb. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out, and we can get to the word out there to other people. So you have a good one. Thank you so much.